Good evening, people. Welcome to J-Ho, the Sports Dude. Thank you for listening to my Boston sports podcast at WMUA. All right, let me shut this off. Hold on. All right, then. So this week we have a lot of big news. Baseball season is here. The Red Sox look to defend their World Series champion. Can't you wait? Isn't it great that it's opening day of baseball? But unfortunately, we got to talk about something that significant that happened this weekend first. And then after that, we'll get into the Red Sox, and then we'll get into some Celtics and Bruins stuff. But for now, we have got to start with something related to the Patriots that happened this week. So we knew that this was probably going to happen, but it finally has happened. Rob Gronkowski of the New England Patriots has announced that last Sunday that he will retire from the NFL. And he announced this on Instagram. So I think most of us kind of figured that this was probably going to happen. Like usually when a player has to think about retirement, he's probably going to retire. And Gronk has you could tell from this year he just wasn't the same, that his body was breaking down and that he just wasn't quite the same player. And so I definitely was not shocked that he announced that he was going to retire. And I did expect it. However, it did make me really sad when thinking about that Gronk was no longer going to be a New England Patriot. And because, basically throughout most of my life, when I really started watching the Patriots, like 24/7, which I would say around like 2011-ish is when I really started to watch a ton of football. And Gronk was always a big part of the Patriots and their offense, and the fact that he's just not. And I've gotten to see Gronk live, in a game and in training camp too. So I've been pretty lucky to see Gronk in person and on TV for all these years. And so even though I kind of knew this was good, and I think everybody knew this was probably going to happen, it's still really. I was still really shocked how much this made me sad. So I'm actually going to read some quotes, one by Robert Kraft and one from Bill Belichick about Gronk and his career. So this is what Robert Kraft said. In the 9 years that I've known Rob Gronkowski, I've never seen him to have a bad day. He always has a youthful exuberance about him and is a joy to be around. As a player, he earned the respect of his coaches and teammates for his hard work, preparation, selflessness, attitude, and sheer dominance on his game. Gronk quickly became a fan favorite and the most dominant player at his position for nearly a decade. I look forward to honoring him in the near future as both a Patriot and Pro Football Hall of Famer. This is what Bill Belichick had to say about Rob Gronkowski. He says, Gronk was a pleasure and a privilege to coach. Rob's impact on our team and organization was felt in many ways. In the ultimate team sport, Rob Gronkowski was a great teammate. His production spoke for itself, but his daily attitude, unmistakably positive energy wherever he went, towards whoever he touched, and will never be forgotten. Rob will leave an indelible mark on the Patriots organization and the game as among the best, most complete players at his position to ever play. So there's definitely a lot that could be said about the man that they call Gronk. And even though I'm pretty sad about him retiring, I think it's would be good if we actually talk about how much of a great career Gronk had. So looking at Gronk's career, he was drafted in 2010 in the second round as a 42nd pick. Definitely a steal by the Patriots, and we'll get into later why he was drafted so low. Gronkowski played from 2010 to 2008, so essentially 9 seasons, and he played 131 games, including playoff games, and he started in 100 games. And I also think it's pretty cool that he was able to go out on top in a Super Bowl. And unlike Peyton Manning or Ray Lewis, when they went out on top in a Super Bowl, he actually was a big part of why they won in catching and run blocking. And speaking of that, I would say in my lifetime, Gronk is the most dominant tight end I've ever seen. And I would say he's a top 3 tight end ever in the history of the NFL. I mean, this man was a 6'6" monster that was 270 pounds, and he was also fast as well. So he was a 3-time Super Bowl champion. Even though in the second Super Bowl he won, he didn't play in that Super Bowl. He was still part of the team, so he's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler, a 4-time first-team All-Pro. And so when you look at Gronkowski, you look at what he brought to the table when defensive coordinators had to look at him. Obviously, he was an amazing receiver. In his career, he has 521 receptions, 7,861 yards. In his career, he has 79 touchdowns. He's also the all-time leader for touchdowns by a New England Patriot. He also has the most seasons with 1,000 receiving yards by a tight end, with 4, and he has the most postseason receiving yards by a tight end with 1,163. The only tight end to reach 1,000 or more yards in the playoffs. He has the most seasons where he caught 10 or more touchdowns, with 5. He's the only tight end in NFL history to have 3 seasons with 10 or more touchdowns and over 1,000 yards receiving. He tied Randy Moss for the most touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. He has the most career postseason receiving touchdowns for his position with 12, as well as the most combined receptions and receiving yards by a tight end in Super Bowl history with 23 receptions and 297 receiving yards. He also ranks first in average receiving yards per game by a tight end with 68.3, average touchdowns per game by a tight end with 0.69, and average yards per target with 9.9 among tight ends. Oh, and also in postseason touchdowns, receptions, Gronk ranks second to Jerry Rice, who has 22, and I don't think that's going to be passed anytime soon, or maybe ever. I also found out this interesting stat. On a per 16 game basis, the average Gronk year would consist of 72 catches, 1,094 yards, and 11 touchdowns. That's crazy. And I would say even more than Troy Brown or Wes Welker or Julian Edelman or Randy Moss, Gronk is the player that Brady has had the most success with throwing to. Brady and Gronk have generated a 127.1 passer rating on 858 targets and a 144.6 against the blitz. So, and also another stat, Brady with Gronk has a 104.7 passer rating with a 70 QBR. And when Gronk's been injured, he has a 95 passer rating and a 61.7 QBR. So Gronk does make a difference, even though Brady was able to win a Super Bowl without Gronkowski. And also, Gronk is third all-time in touchdowns by a tight end, behind Antonio Gates and Tony Gonzalez. And also, I really wanted to talk about the 2011 season, because not only is 2011 the best season Gronk's ever had, it might be the greatest season by a tight end ever. Listen to these stats. So Gronk was 22 at the time. So in this season, he played all 16 games. He had 90 receptions, 1,327 yards. Get a load of this: 17 touchdowns. Wow, and that's the most touchdowns by a tight end in a season. I don't really think it's close. and yards per game 82.9. And Gronk is the only tight end to ever lead the league in receiving touchdowns in a season. So, talk about dominance. And also, there's some other things I want to talk about Gronk that don't really get talked about. Oh, and also before I mention those, obviously I did mention how Gronk is an amazing blocker. I think that goes without saying. Like, Gronk has really helped when the Patriots' offensive line has been shaky and they didn't have great running backs and Brady needed protection. Gronk was there to block for the Patriots, and that's to me what's really separates Gronk from a lot of tight ends in NFL history, because a lot of great tight ends they didn't want to block. Gates, Shannon Sharp, Tony Gonzalez, I think they will tell you. Oh, and Ozzie Newsome, they will tell you that they didn't really desire to block. Gronkowski was willing to block. So that's another aspect about Rob Gronkowski's career that is really appreciated. And also another thing is that what doesn't get talked about Gronkowski is, as a football player, he's really smart. Like, I know Gronkowski, he kind of has this dumb party frat boy image, but if you talk to a lot of people in the Patriots organization, they said that Gronkowski is one of the smartest football players in the building. Like, the Patriots have a very complicated system, there's been a few Patriots players who have not been able to adapt. I'm thinking about Chad Ochocinco, who never got the Patriots system, and they just couldn't do anything in it. But Gronk was able to adapt, and in many interviews with Patriots players and Bill Belichick, they talk about how smart and meticulous a player Gronkowski was. And another thing that I want to talk about with Gronkowski that doesn't get talked enough is about how unselfish he is. I don't mean to pile on to other athletes, but if you look at somebody like Odell Beckham Jr. or Antonio Brown, like I'll do Odell Beckham Jr. first. Like, it kind of seems like whenever he doesn't get the maximum amount of targets from Eli Manning, he goes on a hissy fit. And with Antonio Brown, you could see this year that he was upset that Juju Smith-Schuster was getting a ton of targets, that he kind of felt that those should have been his. And with Gronk, I've seen games in which he only has 3 receptions, and he never complains. As long as they win, he's fine. And it really showed this year. Even though Gronk was a shell of himself, he still could have complained to get more targets, because even though he was not himself, he was still probably one of our better receivers. And he could have complained, but he didn't. He helped with the running game by blocking. And this really showed in the Charger game, because Gronkowski didn't really get many receptions in that game. In fact, I don't remember if he ever did. But the Patriots' running game was going really well, and Gronkowski was able to block and give holes to Sonny Michel, and the Patriots essentially blew out the Chargers because of the run game. So that's one aspect of Gronkowski that doesn't really get talked about much. And also, he takes pay cuts compared to what his actual value is, just like Tom Brady. So that also shows how unselfish Gronkowski is. And also, this is pretty obvious about Gronkowski, is he's one of the most unique characters in Boston sports history, like Manny Ramirez, Kevin Garnett, or Don Cherry. I would say Gronk is the Shaq of the NFL. Just think about it. A guy who is funny and charismatic and lovable, and yet big and dominant, and will leap over people and impose his will on other players, and was also a winner. I would say, so that's why I think Rob Gronkowski is the Shaq of the NFL. He had many catchphrases like "Yo soy fiesta." He had the Gronk spike. He had the party boat. So there's a lot of things, and also he seemed to always have the most fun during the Patriots parades, while interacting with fans. And Gronk was a fresh breath of fresh air, because when you think of most of the players who play for the Patriots, you think of guys who are very stoic, very serious, very focused, and don't really show a lot of personality. And Gronk definitely was the antithesis of that. So Gronk was really stood out, and like Robert Kraft said, that's why I think he became a fan favorite to a lot of Patriots fans. And obviously you could tell that his injuries, and he's had a long injury history, have taken a toll, and that's the main reason why he's retiring. So let's look at Gronk's injury history, because it's pretty long. And like I said before, I mentioned the reason I left it in the air why Gronk was drafted as low as he was. Well, that's because he had injury history in college. He had a back vertebral disc hernia in 2009, which essentially forced Gronk to miss the entire 2009 season in University of Arizona. And when he came to the Patriots in 2012, he had a high ankle sprain, an ankle hip pull, an arm forearm fracture, and he missed 5 games. And also he suffered the high ankle sprain in the AFC Championship, and he played in the Super Bowl, where you could kind of tell he wasn't really himself. In 2013, he had an arm forearm fracture, a back vertebral fracture, a concussion, a torn ACL, and a torn MCL. In 2015, he had a knee sprain, missed 1 game. In 2016, he had a hamstring pull, and he missed the entire preseason and the first 2 games of the regular season. He had a chest-lung bruise, a back vertebral disc hernia. He missed the final regular season games, and as well as the playoffs. In 2017, he had a leg-thigh bruise. In 2018, he had a concussion and a back/ankle injury, and he missed 3 games. So Gronk has had a long injury history, and as much as I would like to see Gronk play more, because he was a lot of fun to watch. Like, watching him block, make crazy catches, and run over people was a lot of fun to watch. But as much as I love that stuff, I don't want to see Gronk have post-career injuries, and you could tell those injuries were piling up and taking a toll. And I feel like if he continued to play more, it would increase the risk of Gronk having long-term health problems. Look at athletes like Earl Campbell. Like, I don't want Gronk to end up like Earl Campbell. And now, the other question about Gronk is whether or not he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer, or if he's even a Hall of Famer in general. From what I can gather, the consensus is he is a first-ballot Hall of Famer. But you do get those guys who say that he isn't a Hall of Famer. And I actually know somebody who told me that he didn't think Gronk was a Hall of Famer. And my understanding is, for the most part, the argument would be that he just didn't play enough and was hurt all the time. And that's understandable, but I have to disagree. I believe that Gronkowski is a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Here's why. First of all, there are plenty of players in the NFL Hall of Fame who didn't exactly have the longest careers. You look at a player like Jim Brown. He played from 1957 to 1965, so about 8 years. And Gale Sayers, who's also in the Hall of Fame, had a 6-year career. And also, they were in the Hall of Fame before they turned 20, which, so if Gronk were able to make it to the Hall of Fame, he would be the 3rd player to be in the Hall of Fame who retired before 30. And so, and it's not, and also, you look at Terrell Davis. He had a 6-year NFL career, and I know he wasn't a first-ballot Hall of Famer, but he did get in, so there is precedent that a guy who didn't have a long career was able to get in. And I don't really like bringing this guy up, but O.J. Simpson, you look at his stats, he only had, I would say, 5 Hall of Fame years in his career. And Gronkowski, I believe, definitely has at least 5 years of seasons in which he played at a Hall of Fame level. And I know what people are going to say. Those are running backs. Well, why don't we look at some tight ends, shall we? You look at Kellen Winslow. He played from 1979 to 1987. So that's essentially 8 years. So not too far off from how long Gronkowski's played. He's played 109 games to 90 and started 94 games, which is less than Gronkowski's played. He has 541 receptions, 6,741 yards receiving, and 45 touchdowns, which is less than Gronkowski. And he was also a 5-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time first-team All-Pro. Like, many people consider Kellen Winslow the first ever modern tight end. And he is undoubtedly a first ballot Hall of Famer. And like Gronkowski, he kind of ended his career because of injuries. And why don't I bring up another guy, John Mackey, who is considered an all-time great. He played from 68 to 72. So that's around 9 to 10 years. So not too far off from how long Gronkowski's played. He has 331 receptions, 5,236 receiving yards, and 38 touchdowns. He is undoubtedly a Hall of Famer. Here's another tight end, Charlie Sanders, who played for the Detroit Lions from 1968 to 1977. Which is about 9 years as well. He was a 7-time Pro Bowler, a 3-time first-team All-Pro, and had 336 receiving yards and 4,817 receiving yards and 31 touchdowns. And I understand back in the day wasn't as much a passing league, but the games still matter, and the fact is Gronkowski, I think when you look at his resume, even though he might have had a bit more injuries than the other guys, you look at his stats and his career, they match up to some of the greatest tight ends who were no doubt first ballot Hall of Famers. Also, if you ask me where I think Gronk ranks as far as all-time Patriots, I would actually say he's the third greatest Patriot of all time. Obviously, Tom Brady's one. There's no disputing that. I would actually put John Hanna at 2 because he's the greatest left guard of all time, and he's the Patriots' first ever Hall of Famer. So I put him ahead of Gronk. But other than that, I think Gronk is the third greatest Patriot of all time, ahead of Troy Brown, ahead of Ty Law, ahead of Drew Bledsoe, ahead of Andre Tippett, ahead of a lot of great Patriots. And before we take a break and we move on to the next subject, I just want to say one thing about Gronkowski. And I essentially posted this on my Instagram, but I just got to say it. I just got to say something about Gronkowski one last time. So all I got to say to Gronk is, even though he'll probably never hear this, is thank you, Gronk, for what you've done for the Patriots. You've been the most dominant tight end I've ever seen, and your exuberant personality definitely made you a fan favorite. Hopefully, you find something cool to do in your post-football career, and hopefully, we'll see you in Canton when you're eligible. So, thank you, Gronkowski, and thank you for what you've done for the Patriots. All right, then, while we take a break, and when we come back, we got to talk about baseball and the Red Sox. All right, then, welcome back to J-Ho, the Sports Dude, and all right, let's go into baseball. So, the baseball season's back, and tomorrow is the opening day for baseball, and oh boy, I can't wait. Well, the Red Sox are back, defending World Series champions, and so why don't we take a look at this Red Sox team, and let's talk about how they've been since we last saw them win the World Series in LA against the LA Dodgers. So I would say for the most part, this team didn't really make any. This team's gonna mostly look the same as last year. I didn't really make any additional moves to the team. So the moves that they did make are a lot of re-signings. Obviously, the big one is that Chris Sale has gotten a 5-year extension, which is worth $145 million. And also, Nathan Eovaldi re-signed for a 4-year, $67.5 million contract, and Steve Pearce signed a 1-year, $6.5 million contract. Unfortunately, the Red Sox lost Joe Kelly to the Dodgers and were not able to re-sign Craig Kimbrell, who I believe has not really been signed by another team, but his contract demands were a bit too much for the Red Sox, so he's no longer a Boston Red Sox. They also signed other players like Juan Constantino, Gorski Hernandez, Journey Mia, sorry if I mispronounced these, Erasmo Ramirez, Tony Renda, Zach Putman, Carson Smith, Ryan Weber. So they've signed a lot of other players, but I don't really think those are real difference makers. So here's what the Red Sox have looking forward to this year. So looking at this offense, I think the offense for the Red Sox should be pretty close to what the offense was last year. I mean, looking at this, I mean, they still have a really stacked lineup. Obviously, Mookie Betts is coming back off his MVP year, and he should have a big year since he's playing for a big contract, especially looking at how much Mike Trout and Manny Machado and Bryce Harper got. I don't expect him to get anything close to what Bryce Harper got. I mean, what Mike Trout got, but I could see him maybe around Machado range. So we'll see what happens to Mookie Betts, but I expect him to have a big year. JD Martinez is also coming back, and he should also be playing very well. He was playing also at a high MVP level, and if the voters weren't obsessed with WAR, he might have gotten more MVP votes. And so I expect JD Martinez to continue hitting home runs, and let's see if he can hit over 43 home runs, which is what he hit last year. And I also expect to see solid years from Andrew Benintendi, Xander Bogaerts, Mitch Moreland, Rafael Devers, and Jackie Bradley Jr., who can contribute offensively. Jackie Bradley Jr. can be kind of on and off, so can Rafael Devers, but they definitely have their moments, and I expect big things from them. And of course, I almost forgot, you guys also got to include Brock Holt and Eduardo Nunez in as far as players that can contribute offensively. Christian Vasquez and Blake Swihart are not the greatest offensive players, but I think they are very solid at playing catcher behind the plate, so I expect big years from them. And like last year, the Red Sox have speed. They have players that can steal bases, and obviously that's a big asset to the team. And also, the Red Sox might have the best outfield in baseball. You got Betts, Bradley Jr., and Benintendi in the outfield with JD Martinez, who usually plays DH, but Betts, Bradley Jr., are great defenders. And not really much questions about the offense and the outfield. The only one that I can think of is Dustin Pedroia. He hasn't played in a while. He hasn't played much since he got injured. Last year he played, I believe, 3 games after knee surgery, and he wasn't very good. He was 1 for 11, and he was out for the season after getting a knee inflammation. And they did pretty well without him. And so the biggest question on the offensive side of the ball is Dustin Pedroia, and what are we going to see from Dustin Pedroia? In my opinion, we're probably never going to see the Dustin Pedroia from old, the one that won the MVP, the one who would win Gold Gloves. I don't know if we're going to ever see that Dustin Pedroia, but if he can do anything close to that, I think he will be an asset to the team. In my opinion, Dustin Pedroia, his biggest asset will probably be his leadership. If they have some downturns, then Obviously, his presence will be huge because can he can motivate the team, and he has a ton of experience playing in baseball. So, and he's the oldest player on the team, so he's definitely one of the leaders. And so that would be, I think, his greatest asset to the team. And so looking at pitching, I think the starting pitching for the Red Sox is very solid. You got Chris Sale, who is your starting ace, and he's also one of the best pitchers in baseball. You also have Nathan Eovaldi coming off his World Series performance. You got Eduardo Rodriguez, who I've heard very good things about in spring training. You have Rick Porcello and David Price, who have also played well in the playoffs, and they're also coming back, who are very solid starting pitchers. However, I guess it goes without saying that the obvious issue with this Red Sox team is their bullpen. In the bullpen, they still have Matt Barnes, Colton Brewer, Ryan Brazier, Heath Hembry, Tyler Thornburg, and Brian Johnson, Brandon Workman, and Hector Velasquez. And they actually were pretty good in the World Series, but none of those guys I would say you can really count on. I don't know if any of those guys really strike fear into other players. Like I said before, the Red Sox lost Joe Kelly and Craig Kimbrell, so it thins your bullpen, and like I said, there isn't really anybody that you fear on this bullpen. And they don't really have a true closer, even though I guess Matt Barnes is currently labeled the closer. I don't think they have a definitive closer right now. However, I think it's something that they can figure out. And if the closer part is an issue, I believe that the Red Sox will do something at the trade deadline to fix that issue. I don't really know what they could do, but I think it's definitely something that they will keep their eye on. And I think even last year with Craig Kimbrell and Joe Kelly there, the bullpen was always very shaky, and the Red Sox were able to still do well without a great bullpen. So I don't think it'll be a deal breaker for this team, but I think it's something to definitely look out for. Also, there's also few things to look at with this team. Obviously, with any team, health. Like last year, they were pretty fortunate as far as injuries. Dustin Pedroia was the only player I could think of that really was out for the year. Nathan Eovaldi has an injury history with a pair of Tommy John surgeries. JD Martinez has injury history. Dustin Pedroia has an injury history. Chris Sale has had some injury problems, especially in the second half of baseball seasons. So we'll see if the Red Sox can stay relatively healthy. And the other thing is, in spring training, they didn't look that great. They were 12-17-1, and it kind of ended with a butt whooping from the Chicago Cubs. I don't really put a ton of stock in spring training because it's preseason. It's not the actual season, but it's something to be a little worried about, especially when last year they were 22-9 in spring training. So it worries me a bit. And honestly, looking at this team, I could see them having a slow start. It kind of seems like maybe this team isn't quite ready to get bounced into this season, and they might get off to a little bit of a slow start, and it might take them a little while to really get into the swing of things. And there might be a bit of a World Series hangover, but I think this team will be all right. I think this team is way too talented to not contend for a World Series. I think this team is definitely a playoff team, and I think this team has a good chance to defend their World Series championship. I think this team can win between 95 to 104 games. They're not winning 108 games. I mean, if they win 108 games again, I'll buy a bottle of vodka and drink all of it to celebrate. That's what I'll do if they actually do that. So I think my guess is they win 102. I think this team is really good, and I think this team can really, like I said, contend for defending their World Series championship. It's gonna be tough because I don't think there's there hasn't been a repeat World Series champion since those 90s Yankees teams, but I think they have a good shot. So why don't we quickly go over actually what I think is going to be the MLB standings for each division. So why don't we start with the let's start with the AL East. I'm going to try to go through these as quick as possible. So AL East, unsurprisingly, I have the Red Sox at 1. I got the Yankees at 2. And the thing about the Yankees is they definitely did improve this offseason. And I think the consensus is that the Yankees are going to win this division. But I kind of get the feeling that everybody has the opinion that the Red Sox haven't caught up to the Yankees. Last year, who won the playoffs? Who won the division? The Red Sox. So I'm pretty sure it's the Yankees who have to catch up to the Red Sox, not the other way around. And I don't know if you guys remember, but the division race wasn't really that close. The Yankees had a great year, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty early on that we kind of figured that this division was over. For a while, this wasn't really a competitive race to win the division. I think this year's it's going to be really close. I think it should be really competitive. But I'm still going with the Red Sox. So until the Yankees prove otherwise, I'm going with the Red Sox. So I have the Yankees at 2. I think both teams can win over 100 games too. So I think I think this could come down to maybe 1 or 2 games. Then the Rays I have at 3. Blue Jays I have at 4. And I have the putrid, horrible Baltimore Orioles at 5. And the AL Central, probably the worst division in baseball. I have the Indians at 1. I have the Twins at 2. I have the White Sox at 3. And then the bottom 2 is kind of a coin flip. I wasn't sure who to put in order. But I put the Royals at 4 and Tigers at 5. I think both the teams are going to be awful. I just kind of had to... it's slim pickings on who was going to be worse. AL West, I got the Astros going first. Athletics 2nd, Angels 3rd, Mariners 4th, even though they've traded everybody away, and I got the Rangers at 5. And at least I got the Nationals at first. That might shock some people, but I think the Nationals have a really talented lineup. They in the offseason, they added Patrick Corbin and Anibal Sanchez to replace Gio Gonzalez and Tanker Rourke to the rotation, and a bounce-back candidate, Brian Dozier, was signed to play second base, and top prospect Victor Robles has now been is also there too. So I think the Washington Nationals are actually really talented. I think with Bryce Harper out of the picture, there's less pressure on them, and I still think they're really talented, and I think the Washington Nationals can win the division. Also, I have the Braves at 2nd. I have the Mets at 3rd. I have the Phillies at 4th. Even though they added Bryce Harper, I still think they need to add a lot of pieces on offense, and they could use some more starting pitching. I just think the Phillies have a little bit more to add before they can really start contending with the big boys. And then the Marlins are 5th. No surprise there. NL Central, this was pretty tough. This might be the hardest division to pick. So first, I have the Cubs. The second, I have the Cardinals. With the addition of Paul Goldschmidt. And I think the Cubs are the best team in this division, even though I think their championship window's ticking down a bit. But I still think the Cubs are the most talented. I have the Brewers at 3rd to regress a little bit because I don't think they really got that much better. And I have the Diamondbacks at 4th, and I have the Giants last. So those are my picks for the division. All right, then why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the Boston Bruins and the Boston Celtics. All right, then welcome back, and now let's talk about the Boston Bruins. So the Bruins continued their road trip and played the New Jersey Devils and pretty much smoked them like they did with the Islanders. This wasn't as lopsided as that game, but this game was still a pretty dominant win by the Bruins. So Bruins won 5-1. So Bruins struck first in the first period, and in the second period, New Jersey and both Boston and New Jersey had a goal. And then in the third period, the Bruins scored 3 goals and basically just put the game away. And yeah, so good win for the Bruins. So shots, Bruins had 27 shots. New Jersey had 22 hits. New Jersey had 26. Boston had 14. Block shots, Bruins had 7. New Jersey had 15, and giveaways, Bruins had 1, and New Jersey had 9. So Tuukka Rask had blocked 21 of 22 shots. Patrice Bergeron had 2 goals and an assist, and David Pastrnak had a goal and an assist. So pretty good for the Bruins. The Devils aren't very good, so you could argue that the Devils are have a bunch of injuries, and this was just going to be a spanking. But I don't know. Just like the Islanders, even though I guess beating the Islanders is more impressive than beating the Devils. Like, I don't know. You're playing on the road, and they still play very well. So, still a very good win by the Bruins. Next, the Bruins played the Florida Panthers and won 7-3. So, another slaughtering of another team. So in this game, the Bruins struck first in the first period, and then basically put the game away, outscoring Florida 5-2 in the second period. And then in the third period, both teams scored a goal, and essentially the game was over from there. So this game was pretty unique in a few ways. This was after Chara got his 1-year extension, and in this game, he was able to get his 200th career goal in this game. And also, he had an assist, too. Marchand also had a goal and an assist. And also, there's something I should mention about this, but first let me mention the stats for this game. So, shots, Bruins had 39. Panthers had 34. Hits, Florida had 47. Bruins had 25. Giveaways, Panthers had 24, Bruins had 12. So a pretty dominant win by the Bruins against another team that isn't really going anywhere. And also, with the win in this game, the Bruins clinched a playoff berth. Woohoo! Yeah! So now all they need to do is secure the second seed in the Atlantic Division, which I think they're probably going to do. I think it's basically impossible for them to catch the Lightning. So I think best case scenario, they clinch the second seed in the Atlantic, and we'll see who they play. It's probably most likely going to be Toronto. So we'll see. And after this game, the Bruins played the Tampa Bay Lightning. Speaking of the Lightning, and this was a pretty hard loss to take. I mean, losing to the Lightning is not the biggest, not like a complete heartbreaker, because the Lightning are the best team in the NHL. But like, the Bruins played really well, and they probably should have won this game. So in the first period, the Tampa Bay Lightning were up 2-1 in the first period, but then in the second period, the Bruins dominated and were up 4-2. However, in the third period, they completely ran out of gas, and the Tampa Bay Lightning scored 2 goals to tie the game, and then they were able to get a goal to take the lead, and they didn't look back, and the Tampa Bay Lightning won 5-4. So, pretty rough loss for the Bruins. In the third period, you could tell they were just gassed, and they just couldn't keep up with Tampa Bay and their speed and their talent. Shots, and plus this was on the road, so you can understand them losing, but it's still kind of heartbreaking because you knew that they had a real good chance to win. So Bruins shots had 17 shots, Tampa Bay had 28. Hits, Bruins had 22, Lightning had 33. Block shots, Bruins had 10, Lightning had 11. And Marchand, like I said before, Marchand had 2 goals, so he had a really good game, but unfortunately they just weren't able to close the game out. So, And next game, they play the New York Rangers, and they should probably beat them. I mean, Rangers aren't a very good team, even though they actually haven't beaten New York all year. That's crazy. So I do expect them to beat the Rangers pretty bad because they're not very good, and this is they know their season's over. So all right then. Why don't we move on to the Pittsburgh Celtics. I mean the Boston Celtics, or the Boston Steelers. Oh God, here we go. After coming off that pretty rough loss to the 76ers, you would hope that they would come back and beat a team like the Hornets, who are not a playoff team. They have Kemba Walker, who's beast, but they're just not a playoff team. And for a while in this game, it kind of looks like they were going to respond and beat this team. In the first quarter, Boston was up 35-29. In the second quarter, Charlotte was able to bounce back, outscoring the Celtics 34-29. But in the third quarter, the Celtics were able to pull away in this game. In the third quarter, the Celtics went on a 22-5 run and led by 18 with 8 minutes to go. And then at the end of the game, the Celtics allowed the Hornets to go on a 30-5 run. What the hell? A 30-5 run. Are you kidding me? Why is this defense so awful? Well, wasn't the signature of this team their defense? Oh, my God. So, Kyrie Irving had 30 points. Kemba Walker had 36 points. Like, Kyrie Irving's putting up great numbers, but either one, it just doesn't seem like he's distributing the ball enough, or two, his teammates just stink while he's on the floor. I don't know. So, and here's a stat. Rebounds. Charlotte had 63. Boston had 50. So, that shows you something. Oh, God. I think that this team... What's wrong with this team? All right, the next game. So, the next game, the Celtics played the San Antonio Spurs, and they got their butts whipped. Yeah, going into this game, you kind of knew... I figured that they were going to lose very badly. And they lost really badly. Like, you would think that the Celtics are more talented than San Antonio, but San Antonio is a team. This doesn't really feel like a team. So they lost 115-96. LaMarcus Aldridge had 48 points. Kyrie Irving had 11 points and 12 assists, but went 5 for 17 from the field. Marcus Smart led the team in points for 14 points. Marcus Smart's pretty good, but I don't know if it's a great sign if he's your leading scorer. Field goal percentage, San Antonio shot 51%. Boston shot 40.4%. Get a load of this. San Antonio shot 33.3% from 3, and Boston shot 20%. So, and I know in this game, Boston didn't have Jason Tatum or Al Horford or even Robert Williams III. Even though they did have Gordon Hayward and Aaron Baines, but I mean, can you at least give us a better, especially at home, can you give us a better effort and not look like ass? Ay. All right then. So the Celtics had another 4-game losing streak. I'm gonna tell you what I think. I'm going to tell you what I think this losing streak means, and the loss to the Sixers means. But on the next game, they played a terrible Cavs team without Kyrie Irving and won 116-106 to snap their losing streak. I mean, you're happy they won, but Cavs were terrible, so I mean, there's really nothing to really take away from the game. So Marcus Smart had 21 points. Colin Sexton had 24 points for the Cavs, but didn't really matter. Celtics were able to take this game. Boston shot 50.5% from the field. Cleveland shot 48.8%. 3-point percentage, Boston shot 40%. Cleveland shot 32.1%. There is one good thing that came out of this Cleveland game. With the Celtics winning and the Pistons losing, the Boston Celtics clinched a playoff berth. So, yeah, I mean, no matter what you could say about the Celtics, they're in the playoffs. And in the playoffs, I kind of consider the playoffs a different season, so you can refresh your mind and stay focused. Because in the playoffs, teams are more focused, and so they don't underachieve as much as they do in the regular season, which I think can apply to the Celtics. But I don't know. As you could tell from my tone about this show, I've just never really felt comfortable about this team, about their cohesiveness, about their chemistry, about their 3-point shooting, about their rebounding. I don't know. I just have a lot of questions about this team. And what was I gonna say before? I think I'm ready to give up on this team catching Philadelphia. Like, Philadelphia, I don't think they're quite as good as the Celtics. But the thing about the Sixers is they're consistent. They beat all the teams they need to beat. They'll beat the bad teams. They'll compete with the good teams. The Celtics will just, I don't know. They sometimes compete with the good teams, and they sometimes lose very badly to good teams, and sometimes they don't play very well against bad teams, and sometimes they play really well against bad teams. So I think I'm ready to give up on the fact that this team can catch Philadelphia. However, I do think this team could still catch Indiana, because they're playing them, I believe, twice before the end of the regular season. So if they beat them twice, and Indiana somehow maybe loses, and the Celtics can maybe go into this end of the season with some good momentum, I think they can pass Indiana. So, all right, then, why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll do some quick stories. And we definitely got a lot of quick stories this week, so I'll be right back. All right, then, welcome back, and now here's a newer segment I introduced last week. So sometimes I don't have time to discuss. There are certain stories during the week that I don't have a ton to say about, so I'll discuss in this segment, which is called Quick Stories, not the most creative title, but it's basically big stories of the week, and I don't really have a ton to say about them. So, and for the most part, I don't think I disagree too much with the consensus on a lot of these, but we'll see. So our first story is that the NFL has announced that in 2019, pass interference rulings can be reviewed. There's been some other rule changes, but this is the big one, that pass interference can be reviewed. I'm sure you guys remember the horrible non-call against the New Orleans Saints in the NFC Championship game. So, and also I did hear that there would have been a bad pass interference call against the Patriots if they had this. But so I'm kind of mixed on this. On the one hand, I am glad that something is being done, because what happened in that NFC Championship game cannot happen again. Like, that was an embarrassment for the NFL. With this rule, that would have been called, because it was flat out obvious. Because there was no rule that you could review it, they couldn't overturn it. So I'm glad that there is something in place. However, there are two things. One, that is a passing league. So if you make pass interference is reviewable, and it could slow the game down, and it could make games go even longer, because there's going to be a bunch of deep passes and then a bunch of questionable pass interference calls, and then you're just going to have a bunch of, because this is a passing league, so if you can review them now, then you're gonna get a lot more officials reviewing calls, and it's gonna make the game drag. However, the big problem with this, the big issue with this, is that pass interference is kind of ticky tacky. Like players go so fast. So it's kind of hard to judge it on the human on the with the human eye. So it's kind of hard to really tell if there's a pass interference. Like if it's obvious, obviously you review it and you change it. But like if it's like if it's barely pass interference, like are you gonna call pass interference? Because there's a lot of both offensive and defensive pass interference. And like, what are you gonna do against Hail Marys on a Hail Mary? Because there's a lot of like, what's your definition of a pass interference? Just like grabbing? Like it's kind of hard to determine based on the naked eye what a pass interference is. So you could get some. So I don't want to see football in which like players are like grabbing just a little bit and then like a flag comes out because you like pass interferences, like if like you pass interference like 6 yards down the field, then the team gets 60 yards. So these things have big consequences. So I don't want like a million pass interferences. I prefer football games in which the refs let the players play, unless it's like an obvious call. Then I don't mind if they overturn it. But like I remember I think I heard about this. This is a pretty good I heard somebody make this comparison. But the thing with the hitting the quarterback, like how a defender hits the quarterback, like for a while, like it looked ridiculous that certain way like when Clay Matthews hit Kirk Cousins, it was kind of ridiculous that he got a pass interference. So I just think I would have preferred if they went with the system in which coaches could challenge pass interference calls, because I think the fact that making pass interference ticky-tacky is one, going to make the games go longer, and two, will cost some teams. And I don't like when there's just a million pass interference calls in a game. I like when players are allowed to be physical with each other. All right, then, in the next story, Lonzo Ball and his brothers have seemingly cut ties with the Big Baller brand after it was revealed that Alan Foster, who was the business manager for all the Ball family's companies, including Big Baller brand, allegedly lost $1.5 million. So Foster developed a relationship with the Ball family and with Lonzo and his dad, since Lonzo and Foster's sons were friends in 7th grade, and it's alleged. So this is allegedly, but the allegation is that both Lonzo's personal taxes and Big Baller's taxes couldn't be completed because they could not account for $1.5 million in cash from the business, and so the $1.5 million cannot be found, and it's possible that Owen Foster embezzled the money. And unknown to Lonzo, Foster actually has a criminal past. According to criminal records obtained by ESPN, Foster was sentenced for more than 7 years in prison for pleading guilty to 1 count of mail fraud and 2 counts of money laundering as part of a scheme to defraud 70 investors of $4 million. And also, Foster was ordered to pay $3.7 million in restitution to victims. So, actually, Foster actually met the Ball family shortly after his term in prison. So, it's a little baffling that they didn't know about this, and which is weird because when you think you would check for a guy who's dealing with your money, or they knew and they were just they just didn't care, which makes them look even dumber. So Lonzo and his brothers have removed anything related to Big Baller brand on their social media platforms, and seemingly anything to do with his dad. So, if you know my stance on the whole Big Baller brand and LeVar Ball thing, I always thought Big Baller brand was a sham. I always thought LeVar Ball was an obnoxious jackass. Like, I always thought he was more talk. And I always thought that he was just about LeVar and not his kids. Like, I know he loves his kids, but saying that you could outplay Michael Jordan when you were younger, like saying things like that, saying that you can play tight end better than Rob Gronkowski, um, I mean, that kind of seems like you want the attention for yourself. And like saying that your son is better than your son is better than Steph Curry and LeBron James, like that just puts pressure on your that puts pressure on your son. So, and like I don't mind being cocky and like saying how great you are. My biggest problem is when you say that stuff and you don't back it up. Like this is what I've always had a problem with Rex Ryan. Like Rex Ryan would always talk the talk, but he could never, like he did go to two AFC championship games, but he said he was going to win the Super Bowl. So when you set that bar, like if he said that they were just going to beat the Patriots and do well, then I would have more respect for Rex Ryan. But he kept saying that they were going to win the Super Bowl. And so and LeVar Ball said that Lonzo Ball was going to be better than Steph and LeBron James. So, and I've always thought that Big Baller was a sham because they sold shoes for like, I don't know, like $200, $400, like some crazy price. Actually, I'm looking up right now. So when Big Baller brand shoes dropped, they sold the shoes for $395. My God. Who would buy a shoe from some player playing in the professionals and some loser dad? Jeez. Like, I've never been sold on Big Baller Brand. I thought it was a sham. I thought LeVar was just about LeVar. And I also thought, one, he wouldn't shut up. Two, like, every week I had to hear a story about him. And three, he was not very good at making his kids accountable. Like, I'm pretty sure in an AU game he yelled at a ref, and and when his middle son, I believe, was it LaMelo Ball, I think, when he got in trouble in China, he did not put responsibility on his son. In fact, when this whole thing when he was in trouble, he just decided he was going to take his LaMelo and LiAngelo and just put him in the Lithuanian league, because why not? Because I mean, I don't know. I just think the whole thing was ridiculous. That being said, for my hatred of the Big Baller Brand and LeVar Ball and his big useless mouth, I do kind of feel bad for the Ball family. Like, I feel bad for the kids, especially, and I feel bad for the dad, because I actually don't think they knew about this. And I believe that he trusted Alan Foster. So, and it does make me kind of sad that the kids, I think they kind of blame their dad for this and they don't want to talk to him. So, I do kind of feel bad for that, as much as I trash LeVar Ball. So, I think hopefully they can resolve this. And it looks like Lonzo and the rest of the Ball brothers are moving on. And that's what I've always believed. Like, I think they let their dad control their careers way too much. I think they should finally be their own people. Especially Lonzo, who I believe has an NBA future. I don't... LiAngelo, maybe. LaMelo, probably not. Yeah, most likely not. So, let's move on to the next story. Let's go on a higher note, because that last story was a little depressing. So, the Lakers have officially been eliminated from the playoffs after losing to the Brooklyn Nets, led by D'Angelo Russell. How ironic that is. So, and this is the first time LeBron has missed the playoffs since 2004. So, I mean, you got to admit that it's been pretty impressive that he's been able to make the playoffs for so long. But it finally came to an end, and I'm actually kind of happy. Because it's LeBron and the Lakers. In other news, Duke beat UCF 77-76 in one of the craziest March Madness games you'll ever see. Literally, in this game, Duke was down by 3 with like 20 seconds left in the game, and Zion was able to drive to the basket against, I believe, Taco, and got fouled. But Zion missed a free throw, and then R.J. Barrett got the rebound and put the basket in to get a 1-point lead. And then UCF had the ball with 8 seconds left, and Taylor was able to get a layup towards the basket, but it didn't go in, and then it bounced to another UCF player who got a putback, and it didn't go through, and Duke was able to win. So this was a crazy game. One of the best college basketball games you'll ever see. And Duke definitely got away with one. They probably should have lost this game, but some lucky bounces. Hey, if you're good, you find lucky bounces. That's what I've always say. Like, if you're good, luck sometimes goes your way. All right, next, Conor McGregor randomly announced his retirement on Tuesday on Twitter out of nowhere. And I was like, that's kind of random. And the next thing you know, he's under investigation for sexual assault in Ireland. So, yeah, that makes a little more sense. I have a feeling this is probably going to end Conor McGregor's career. And even if he comes out of retirement, I don't know if he's going to be able to recover from this. But we'll see. So, baseball, I have some more baseball news. So a few baseball players got contract extensions before the season started. So Jake DeGrom got a 5-year, $137.5 million extension. Alex Bregman got a 5-year, $100 million extension. Blake Snell from the Rays got a 5-year, $50 million extension. Paul Goldschmidt got a 5-year, $130 million extension from the St. Louis Cardinals. And so along with Chris Sale, some more players get contract extensions before the season starts. So, good for them. And some more Patriots news. Malcolm Mitchell, I don't know if you guys remember Malcolm Mitchell. He was a rookie wide receiver. He played pretty well in the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons and helped them come back from 28-3. Announced that he's going to retire, and which is sad because he showed a lot of promise whenever he played. And he always seemed to have a good connection with Brady. And from what I've seen from interviews, he seemed like a really good kid. But injuries just kept piling up, and he just couldn't play anymore. So hopefully Malcolm Mitchell has a good career after retirement. But it's still really sad. And also some breaking news that came in. Greg Schiano announced that he's stepping down as defensive coordinator. He's not going to be the defensive coordinator for the Patriots anymore. So I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe on the next show, I can some more details will come out why he is stepping down. But now the Patriots have to look for another defensive coordinator. I'm not 100% sure who's out there. You might get a college guy or I don't know. But, yeah, the Patriots need a defensive coordinator, especially to replace Brian Flores, who I thought did a really good job for them. All right, then. Thank you very much for listening to J-Ho the Sports Dude. And next week we'll have more Boston sports news. And I'm out.